History Committee, and we'd like to welcome you to the final presentation in the winter session of the 9th Annual Tony Woyak History Festival. The festival is sponsored by the Washburn Heritage Association and the Washburn Area Historical Society, and made possible by a grant from the Washburn Community Educational Foundation. Thank you to the Harborview Event Center for hosting us this evening, and a big thank you to our presenter. Feel free to linger after the presentation and enjoy the refreshments provided or a drink from the bar. Also, we invite you to visit the information table next to the refreshment to see our photos and talk with Bayview History Committee members. Finally, if you have ideas for future presentations or would like to give a talk, please speak to one of the sponsoring board members. And I have a quick note from Lorraine Norgard. Apparently people have been asking how long the Godway exhibit was going to be going. And it is for 3 more days, Thursday through Saturday, at the Cultural Center, and it's open from 11 to 4. So tonight I have the honor to talk about our presenter. So we're very delighted to have with us tonight Paul Johnson, whose love of trains and history led to the formation of the Bayview History Committee and the saving of the Houghton Depot. Paul has been a resident of the town of Bayview for 10 years, along with his wife, Karen Bodine Johnson, who grew up in this area. Karen remembers getting candy from the engineer, as well as handing cookies to him on a pole that her dad made. And recently, at an affair that they both went to dealing with trains, she met this engineer, Bob Brown, once again, which is kind of fun. So Paul was introduced to trains early as a young student. He was raised on a farm south of Grantsburg, Wisconsin, where he attended a 1-room schoolhouse. It was here that Paul's passion for trains and building model railroads began. He found books on trains and model building in the school library and soon built a model railroad in his bedroom. His love of trains took a back seat while he was a missionary in Trinidad and Pakistan over a 16-year period. However, getting a ride in the cab of a steam locomotive on an excursion from Peshawar up to Peshawar Pass in a frontier area of Pakistan was a highlight he remembers well. Once he returned to the U.S. and moved to Fresno, California in 2001, he discovered a hobby store half a mile from his home, and his interest in trains was reignited when the model train guy who worked there invited him to join a train modeling group. This is where Paul learned and practiced building model railroads, and this time he built one in the garage. This model was one of the rails running from Fresno to the Sierra Mountains. A subsequent move to Bayview brought him to a home adjacent to the Houghton Railroad, and once again, his love of history and passion for building model railroads led to the model we see here today. It is composed of 3 parts: Houghton Village, Bayview Park, and the Bodine property in 1913. And tonight, because of his efforts and those of the BHC, Bayview History Committee, the Houghton Depot has been rescued and just yesterday was moved to its final home. How many of you saw it being moved? And now that it's there, it will be restored. So with great pleasure, I present the driving force behind this project, Paul Johnson.
It's nice to be here tonight with you, many that I know, and many of you who enjoy this history that we look at. The man operating the model railroad here is Ken Draper, a fellow model railroader from Iron Mountain, Michigan, and I want to thank him for coming here and helping out. At the front end of that model railroad that Mary just mentioned, there's a trench behind the tracks. The earth dug out to build up the railroad grade near where I live. Swedish guys worked there, so they were called Swede holes. Speaking of Swedes, Ole and Lena lived south of Superior, close to the Wisconsin-Minnesota border. So close that Ole was unsettled about which state he belonged to. He paid taxes in Wisconsin, but his address is Minnesota, since the closest town was there. He kept asking Lena which state they lived in, and Lena got tired of that. So she suggested they hire a surveyor to find out and settle the matter. When the report came back, they found out they lived in Wisconsin. Then Ole said to Lena, "Oi, oi, oi, I'm so glad I have to find that out. I would not be willing to live another winter in Minnesota." If the Houghton Depot had eyes, it saw a range of events to which we will focus our attention this evening. Its first life, which began around 1884, was as a depot in Houghton Village, built to help move brownstone goods and people. When regular passenger service ended in 1934, the depot began its 50-year second life as part of a private home. You will hear about its third life tonight. Please note that any photos not credited were taken by the Bayview History Committee folks. Also, this presentation came with script input from Sally Bear, Kim Susky, and PowerPoint help from Dan Kovach and from Mary Gruel. Mary spent many hours helping, and I appreciate her help. Here is the town of Bayview. The blue circle indicates where the depot was until yesterday, and the red line tells you the new location at Bayview Park. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so there's the map, and you have the circle and the line. Where was the Houghton Depot? From Washburn, northbound on Highway 13, turn right on Frostman Road, then turn left on Bodine Road, and go 1/8 mile. Just before the first dip in the road, the depot stood on the left, on the near side of the railroad grade. Dick Bodine lived a few hundred feet further north of the depot location, seen it there until age 10. He told me this 9 years ago. Let's look at the first life of the depot building. How did this rural landscape become busy enough to need a depot? Why and when did the depot get built and located at Houghton Point? A couple of quarrymen, Babcock and Smith, began extracting brownstone in 1885 at the site of the present-day boating resort. Was the depot built by them or for them? We don't know yet. Does this board in the photo from the depot give us a hint? If Babcock and Smith erected the depot to prepare for their quarrying operations the next year, then October 1884 fits. The depot likely was in place when Frederick Prentice came back to start quarrying. My saying Prentice came back means he had been here before. We need to step back in time to catch a flavor of this most famous quarryman of Bayfield County. Frederick Prentice came to the Chequamegon Bay region in the 1850s as a businessman who saw the potential of this bay becoming a world-renowned shipping port. In 1854, he co-founded the Bay City, that land that was later part of Ashland. And in 1857, along with Maddox and Tucker, Prentice co-founded the town of Houghton, then known as Prospect Point. In hopes of attracting people, they advertised it as having one of the best natural harbors on the Great Lakes. They claimed it lay in the midst of fertile agricultural county and conveniently close to the extensive fisheries of the Apostle Islands. This town was named for Douglas Houghton, an early American explorer and geologist of the South Shore of Lake Superior. He came to our area during the 1840 Houghton expedition with Bella Hubbard on the ship Jane. This city plan was to be located around the inlet at today's Houghton Falls Nature Preserve. But the financial panic of 1857 halted this development before it started. Prentice returned to the town of his birth, Toledo, and engaged in the oil trade and other pursuits. He did not give up. He bought 1 mile of land north of the inlet along the lakeshore in 1858. Prentice came back in 1880 for a short time with a focus on Ashland. He left this area again for several years. You can read about Frederick Prentice in the upcoming publication, the Garland City Gazette, coming out next week actually. During his absence, the Omaha Railroad started from Ashland Junction in 1881. 14 months later, in February 1883, the bridge across the Sioux River was constructed. On July 21st, 1883, rails to Houghton Point were laid. And on October 12th, 1883, the first train to reach Bayfield arrived at 4:04 p.m. amidst the cannon blast, ship whistles, and train toots. In 1887, we find that Frederick Prentice was back in the Chequamegon Bay. Perhaps he heard about Babcock and Smith's quarrying operation just north of the property he had purchased in 1858. He had prime land for quarrying and a railroad running right through it. Prentice began to build up the village to provide for his quarry workers. And there's some colors there, color codes. Not that he built all of them, but some of them he did. So there was a paymaster's office, a blacksmith, the boarding house in blue, homes for families, a school in red, a store and post office in green, and the depot in yellow. The earth above the brownstone was removed to prepare for quarrying. The Houghton map that you see here was drawn by Carl Frostman in 1973 as he remembered it as a youngster in about 1897. And in 1888, Prentice, along with Ellis, Shores, Hamilton, and Barr, organized the Prentice Brownstone Company with $1.2 million of capital stock to develop quarries. Prentice became the most famous quarryman in northern Wisconsin. Imagine the noises coming from the quarry with the stone cutting chiseling machines, the train coming full steam up from the Sioux River Flats, the whistle blowing at Adolph Bodine's road crossing and at Bodine Road, then the bell ringing and brakes squealing as it slowed to a stop at Houghton Depot, the boys watching the train details, and the girls imagining traveling to big cities, and the adults getting down to the business at hand. The depot provided a stopping point for brownstone to be loaded on rail to be transported to Chicago because of the fire there and many other places. There was a mainline track and another track providing storage for brownstone stone loads and empty flat cars. The bottom of the picture shows the points of the track that went south with a switchback to straddle the quarries, as you can see on that sketch. North of the depot, a spur track lined the north side of the Babcock and Smith quarry, where I saw moss-covered impressions of the ties 9 years ago. How did the railroad help Houghton Village and the community? The village operated with the convenience of the railroad for shopping, visiting, transporting produce, receiving equipment and building materials, and sending out what the locals could produce. The Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railroad, called the Omaha, was incorporated in 1880. Then the Chicago Northwestern Railroad bought majority stock in 1882. The two railroads operated independently at first, and eventually the C&W absorbed the Omaha in 1957. Now it is part of the Union Pacific Railroad. On this Wisconsin map, with the lakes from Superior and Bayfield on top down to Spooner, you can see the big X at the top provided railroad access to the rest of the country. My wife Karen's uncle, Clifford Bodine, nicknamed Kip, tells of in his autobiography that he took the train as a child to Oregon with his mom, aunt, siblings, and cousins around 1930, boarding at Houghton Depot. Imagine those moms keeping track of those kids on that long train ride. I can see Kip looking out the windows, running all over the train, and playing hide and seek with the cousins. Kip also remembers joining his dad when the men brought boxes of fish to the depot. He recalled that it took 2 men to lift a fish box onto the railroad car. John Oscar Bodine, a boat builder, got much of his lumber and other parts for his boats by rail. His daughter, Donna Kramalis, also tells of her mom going shopping by dragging the children with her the quarter mile to the depot to go to town to shop and getting the kids and the groceries or whatever else back home. The Schindlers from St. Paul took the train and got off at the depot to go to their cabin. Sometimes they were dropped off at their cabin farther along the line if the engineer favored their request. For the general population, workers now could commute daily to Bayfield, Washburn, DuPont, or Ashland. Impossible before the railroad. The depot served the community more than could be imagined. Before the railroad, people carried loads on their backs, used dog sleds in season, and used horse and wagon. The resort business opened this area to many more people as well. How long did the brownstone quarrying last? The quarrying business was prosperous for about 15 years until the 1897 recession. The last quarry closed in 1900, but Prentice was not easily convinced that his business was doomed. Caretakers stayed to keep machinery in order and to act as watchmen. Adolph Bodine, at age 12, in 1907, helped in a quarry for a time. Carl Frostman wrote in his sketch that at age 11 in 1900, he was the water boy at Prentice Quarry. Despite the demise of the brownstone quarry in Bayfield County, there continue to emerge industries, including some logging, fishing, farming, boat building, and tourism, including such as with the Bodines Resort. So what remained of the quarries? In the 1920s, you could see log rolling competitions at the Brownstone Bowl. Karen's relatives and friends talked of swimming there after that. Over time, the population of Houghton Village declined and businesses shut down to lead to a quiet rural community, which is what the neighbors like today. And in 1934, the last regular passenger train to Bayfield marked the end of an era. Trucks and cars had made travel easier. Freight trains still ran with an occasional combine car, that name because it was both a baggage and a passenger car, also used by the conductor. The line remained open until the mid-70s. Today we have some trails, mostly private, of the life of the depot, but it was not to be forgotten. We are ready to look at the second life of the depot building. What happened to the depot after the passenger era? In its second life, the depot building was moved about 100 yards south and east across Boating Road to be the living room of a house. A small open porch provided entry to the kitchen. The former depot entry door had a platform next to it, used mostly with a screen door for ventilation in the summer. Mabel and son Norman Nicholson lived in the depot converted to house at some time or times between 1934 and 1984, when Michael Garnish said it became vacant and had remained so for 35 years. Since they didn't have an indoor bathroom, Mabel in later years spent winters in California, even staying one summer out there. What happened to the depot after the passenger era? This boxy looking building was 14.5 feet by 19.5 feet, 12-foot walls, and 18 feet high at the peak. Notice the siding added above the windows, so smaller windows replaced the high ones that provided a view of the engineer in the locomotive. For the living room, an 8-foot high ceiling replaced the 12-foot one to lower the heating bill. And an oil stove replaced the earlier solid fuel stove at some point in time. For the 50 years, there was the depot living room, a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms as lean-tos to the depot. With Norman's golf bag in the corner, what did he tell his mom after his golf game? I would have made par if it wasn't for that angleworm on the green. We are leaving the now unoccupied building, the depot living room, in 1984, jumping 26 years to 2010, so we can continue the story of the historic depot and add to that a cute little building that kept us in the game. The 2 tours, I was given a tour, and later I gave a tour. The story of the depot's restoration or resurrection to having another life had its beginning when Cindy Warren, the eldest of the Garnish siblings, gave my family a tour of the Garnish place in the summer of 2010. An old paymaster office looked interesting, a curiosity for me at the time. The red building was in some disrepair, and the other one had been a depot before it was a house. Why was I fascinated with these buildings? Please study this early photo of the depot and the village in the right photo. Some of the buildings you saw on the layout are there, and maybe you could pick out some of those buildings that was in that sketch. Before this idea of restoring the depot began, I undertook several projects that led to this third life of the depot. I made a connection by scratch building a model of the depot in 2013 for our Town of Bayview Centennial, with the Omaha Railroad traversing near the shore of Lake Superior. And there you see it. Patrick Earing built model houses plus the Houghton School. Jerry Reinke did some scenery work for me. Jan Miller laid track. Hear the brake noise? The following year, I built an operating scene of the Prentice Brownstone Quarry with a big top canvas as the background sky for the Canvas Squared contest at the Cultural Center. Since the Washburn Homecoming came next in 2015, Jan and Patrick helped me with building a model railroad of the 1956 era when the diesels came in, showing parts of the Ashland Junction to Bayfield line, including the S-curve seen here. My connection to the depot has now covered 5 years, from the depot discovery to depicting in model form our beautiful Bayfield Peninsula. We are now in the fall of 2015 at the Garnish Place, and things started to liven up. How did the depot project come together? In a roundabout way, let me explain. In November 2015, I showed my model railroad to a friend. Then I invited him to tour the areas shown on the model. I led the second tour, and this was a turning point. Are you ready? Well, the Frostman boating corner, I was there about to show where the Prentice Quarry was when Mike Garnish came out of his driveway, stopped and told me his insurance said to re-roof the small red building or demolish it. The depot, the insurance man said, demolish or move it. He asked me, do you want them? Imagine my response. Yes, I certainly do. That question sprung me into action. Michael wanted them to be a benefit to the public. At the next town board meeting, I proposed restoring the 2 buildings. The town board okayed restoring the paymaster office with room tax funds, but not the depot, since they wouldn't use resident tax money for the larger project. That was fair enough. Jan Miller and Wayne Gilbert helped me to get the paymaster's office restored, and then it was relocated at Bayview Park in 2016. How many of you have gone up close to it and read the storyboards? Good, good. Now the rest of you, you have a great opportunity to learn more than what I present tonight. And so I invite you to do that. Because the storm had washed out Saxon Harbor, a Hurley school busload of kids came to Bayview Park that September and returned the next year. The lead teacher told me, or I should say, the lead teacher told the Brownstone history the second year exactly as I had done the year before. I realized that teaching our own Bayfield Peninsula students should be one of our priorities, and we planned for that. I made 2 discoveries. When Cindy Warren saw the inside of this building as it was restored, she remembered it as the Garnish Girl. Memories flooded back. It had been a dollhouse, a schoolhouse, a chicken coop, and a beach house. Actually, she taught multiplication tables to her younger sisters as a schoolhouse. Second, she also confirmed that Mabel told her that it was the paymaster's office for the Prentice Quarry. Maybe after a quarrying period, it could have been used as a ticket office, as has been described by some. When Jenny Murphy saw the paymaster building and heard the depot story, she wanted to preserve our town history with a cultural and heritage center using the depot. The Bayview Town Board granted her request to develop such a center, and with a postcard to town residents, invited participation. No response came from that plea, so this concept was put on hold. In March 2018, Michael Garnish asked me to help with the removal of depot additions because the kitchen roof was collapsing, causing damage to the depot. The depot needed attention soon. I renewed efforts to get support for the depot restoration. From Carla to Lorraine, I started asking different people who I thought might have interest and the ability to lead the effort to save the depot. Even calling Jerry Phillips to see if the Bayfield Heritage Association could lend a hand. I told this to Carla Bremner, Washburn Heritage Association president, and she emphatically said, this project needs to connect to Washburn. Don't you like that? At her I shared our desires with the WHA. Then Charlie spoke to the WHA, checked to determine about their willingness to be sponsors. So as a first step, the Washburn Heritage Association checked to determine the structural and historical integrity of the depot using photos taken by Steve Cotherman. Then I met Lorraine Norgard in September 2018 at our annual Town of Bayview picnic. When I told her about the interest in saving the depot and the progress and setbacks thus far, she said, "Let's do it." That is when a group of very dedicated history lovers decided to rescue the depot and return it to its original form. And so was born the Bayview History Committee, along with a group of volunteers who over the 14 months have worked to deconstruct the depot, locate historic documents, and interview and digitally record our senior people. So the BHC is deeply involved in giving the depot a third life, that of a relocated historic building, to be used as a focal point for our rich history. So the BHC is deeply involved in giving the depot a third life with its historic building to be used as a focal point, but we also have invested over 250 hours so far, mostly on the depot deconstruction. Here's our purpose statement. The Bayview History Committee exists to collect and preserve the history of the town of Bayview and to make it available to residents and the general public. With our purpose defined and approval to start, deconstruction began on November 2018. Michael Payton's evaluation and his guidelines helped us to safely remove the additions. In November 2018, Track McCreary, who's right here, and I started removing the walls of the kitchen where the roof had collapsed. I worked from above, following Michael's guidelines to keep safe. Picking up that mess, it was bag after bag of wet, rotten stuff. No fun here. Jan Miller worked high, if not dry, to remove chimney brick above the roof line. There was a lot of rain at that time. Terry Ledeen helped load those heavy bags onto the trailer, which got snowed in. Michael Garnish removed lots of snow to get it out. Boy, was that driveway slippery. The trailer wouldn't move on the first or second or third try. Snow had to be removed off the roof before taking the roof shingles and boards off. Despite Mary's concern, I didn't fall through or fall off the roof. Do you see the antenna? That antenna came down. The porch walls, wall boards were removed. We cleaned up the inside. All the inside debris was now loaded onto my trailer in load after load. With all the help, it went A, B, C. These wide 1 by 20 inch boards were under the siding in its depot days. We're going to use part of that one for a table. I soaked up the sun, removing the roof from the addition. By the way, if you look on behind the depot, behind the model railroad, you'll see those gloves there with a measure so you can see the 20 inches. Rafters and studs about to be removed. Where are the people? Here's one. Three days of Terry Ledeen's Easter break were dedicated to removing the addition wall. Mission accomplished. Reddish siding under the kitchen roof reveals paint color, and the original depot shape is showing itself. Do you see the kitchen door? The depot window right there gave passengers a view of the tracks. Some siding and shiplap from the additions can be reused on the depot. Mike Heron worked at the sawhorses, and the son and friends made work here enjoyable. Mary cheered us on with her enthusiasm as a crew of nail pullers and debris loaders kept at it. Dick Mahelet provided us with a considerable amount of storage space for recyclable lumber. Deconstruction in the spring of 2019 is nearly finished. The depot is showing its character. I tried several times to open the skeleton key. The movers got it open right away. Michael Woodhull, the mover, on November 11th, suggested to Michael Payton to remove the floor and subfloor before the move. Remarkably, the floating fir floor was intact, and it came up easily, got numbered, and waits for restoration time. Jack Loco removed the chimney from roof height down, saving the reusable bricks. The depot turned house sat on beams that rested on concrete blocks later in its life, as it remained until the move to Bayview Park. Think about this. The house required maintenance to be livable and therefore did not fall apart for another 50 years, so that this former depot reached age 100, close to the time of Washburn's centennial. Then this building sat idle and occupied for another 35 years to bring us up to recent times. Now that the depot has been moved to Bayview Park, we look back. During deconstruction, we discovered secrets from the past. October 1884 as a possible build date of the depot. Very wide boards. There are stories in the graffiti. With only first names, some Croatian people use their town for their last name. Back when jackknives were as common as smartphones are today. And these are but a few of the names we found. You'll have to come and see the finished depot to see if your relatives used their knives to leave their names for posterity. Elmer Bodine to the right. Did he write that? 1929 in the middle. Who are the initials? Cook Lindsay was thrilled to find out that her dad, Bob, at age 16, carved with a chisel his name and the date, 1934. This is the year passenger service on the line discontinued. Coke thinks that her dad was there helping her grandpa, who was a builder. Did he put the additions on the depot to make it a house? If so, Bob's name saw the light of day briefly before a quarter-inch drywall covered it and hid that secret for us to discover after 85 years. Wally Loco worked for the Elmer Bodine fishing business nearby the depot. Wally's son Jack, admiring his dad's carving. Jack removed the chimney for the move. This piece of siding helps us decide the paint color for the exterior of the depot, with paint provided by Nate Swiston at Washburn Harbor. What did the inside of the depot look like? This is how the depot appeared to the generation after 1900, because we don't see any graffiti with dates before that. We see graffiti starting at about 3 feet high on the walls, suggesting that benches line the walls. A 1917 communications record book indicates that there was no station agent at that time. Tickets likely were purchased from the conductor on the train. Was there a telegraph set at the depot in earlier days? Probably, with the number 1651 used as a reference number to identify Houghton Station over the telegraph. I can imagine Mr. Prentice in his Ashland Hotel office in the 1890s telegraphing the depot for information from his foreman at the quarry. But for the white paint color and lowered windows, the depot looked much like this from the northwest on the railroad line. You have to picture the platform and the tracks facing the door. The filled-in siding above the windows shows where we will fit taller custom windows because the agent could see, or whoever could see, the engineer from inside. After a successful year and a half of getting organized and moving the building to its new home, How did the fundraising work out? As the depot stood silent over the last summer, an appeal letter was sent out and funds came in, including a generous grant from the Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Commission. Is there anyone here representing them? Thank you. Is that Bob?
Yep.
Thank you, Bob, and your group. Amounts came from our own residents, friends, relatives, and was operating from a display in Rechdale Park on Brownstone Day and at our August Town of Bayview annual picnic. In October 2019, we had enough to organize the move to Bayview Park. The ground had to be frozen to remove the depot from its 85-year spot. The town board worked out a location for the depot which provided space for both the depot and the paymaster office, and Jenny Murphy worked out the permitting process. Our Bayview History Committee has begun interviewing people with roots here to help us relive their experiences.
My father had a farm in the town of Bayview. He bought the land from his father. I believe they got here about 1907.
Sorry about interrupting. We intend to make available on the web, within permission, the family names and on maps and in stories of Houghton Village and other town of Bayview locations for those whose roots connect them to this community. Peter Wasson generously gave space in the Ashland Daily Press to telling our story on November 22nd, 2019, and the Lake Superior Railroad Museum Junction magazine included our story in December 2019. The Chicago and Northwestern magazine, the Northwestern Lines, has asked me to write a story when the depot is finished. What will be happening in the future? The depot, at less than 15 by 20 feet, is not the size to become a museum, but rather can be a classroom for school students on field trips with multiple subjects related to the area and its history. Can you see school kids on chairs and benches taking in the experience of being at the depot and while waiting for the train learning many aspects of life here over 100 years ago? The two buildings will be open during our annual picnics in August. On February 4th, the movers set up the depot for the move. It pulled away from the foundation. We waited for the movers' permits to okay the move. We wanted the move to take place before February 25th with this presentation. The depot was turned around and back onto Boating Road for the trip. Jacked up chains held the beams together. Starting the journey up Boating Road at 9:30 a.m. on February 24th, yesterday. You see it coming? It made it easily under the power lines. The driver said he'd go faster, but the sheriff was in front of him. Thanks to Mary for doing that. Arrival at Bayview Park. There it is. Backing up the depot into its temporary spot. Hooray! The depot was moved on February 24th, observed by the Ashland Daily Press and a number of interested folk. And it now rests at its new home, Bayview Park. The Woodhull movers were a father, two sons, and a nephew team that worked seamlessly to move the depot. Today, the Houghton Depot is at Bayview Park to be rolled this year onto the yet-to-be-built foundation. When finished, a station platform and track will complete the depot site. The restoration steps: foundation, roof, windows, siding on 2 sides, paint the whole building, the station platform, and track. The final phase is to renovate and furnish the inside and start educating. When we are finished and ready to use the building, our BHC people will initiate the events around the depot and paymaster's office. With a flue and new bricks to add to the usable ones, we will need a pot-bellied stove typical of old depots. So we welcome any ideas about finding a good one to use as needed. I give a heartfelt thank you to the people and groups on this list, but not limited if we missed anyone, however they contributed. Michael Garnish, who donated the buildings, the town of Bayview, who accepted ownership, the Chamber of Commerce, who for a year was our fiscal agent, the Washburn Heritage Association, our sponsor, donors in kind for gifts, volunteers, and Ashland Daily Press for their coverage. Yesterday, one of our volunteers said to me, "You must have a direct line with God with this warm, sunny weather for the depot move and the new donation sent to us." I said, "Well, you can have a direct line as well." Speaking for myself, at age 25, I got on the train that leads to glory with Jesus as the engineer of my life and the Holy Spirit as the fireman, giving me power to do what he wants. The Bible and prayer make it like I'm riding in the cab of the engine with them. I know where I came from, what I'm here for, and where I'm going. Serving people and worthy causes like this depot project are what I want to do for him. Therefore, my story really is his story, history. A few comments again in closing. The completion of this project and the ongoing collecting history will serve our community by helping people appreciate who came here before us. New residents feel a part of the community as they learn its roots, and tourists enjoy another chapter in the stories of the Bayfield Peninsula. With yesterday's promise of additional grant funds that Bob was recognized for, we have received half of the total project amount that we said we needed at the start to finish the depot project. That is since May last year. We are so grateful. In the 10 years I have lived here, saving history has been a worthwhile effort with a lot of cooperating, so that the rest of the restoration brings an invitation. Whoever wants to come and help is welcome, and can come to me to tell of your interest, with a special welcome to younger generations. Thank you for showing your interest by coming tonight. And now it's your turn to ask questions if you have. I have a question for you. Has anyone here ever seen the Houghton Depot? Raise your hand. I'm still talking about Houghton Depot when it was a depot. Okay. Sorry about that. Yes. Any questions otherwise?
I know this is recorded.
You can use that mic there.
This event is recorded. Okay, close, okay. I was wondering if it could be put on YouTube or on Facebook, so that people who are from here or would like to learn the story could see it.
Well, first of all, we have a videographer over here, Andy Grimm. Thank you. He's going to put a copy in the Washburn Public Library. So that'll be a starting point, and we can figure things out after that. Good. Another question? Way back, Lorraine.
Paul, are there other aspects of Bayview history that the committee is going to be addressing, like the Finn settlement or schools or some of the other things you might mention?
Well, the focus, you heard the question about whether there'll be other areas of the town of Bayview involved in our history. While the focus on the depot tonight give us one aspect, our organization, the Bayview History Committee, intends to collect history about all the parts of the town, and so we want stories from all the areas. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
There's a little Finn, I guess it's a Finn settlement over by Ulu. Are you familiar with that little community?
Well, there's a Finn settlement in town of Bayview up Fernley Valley Road.
Right.
But there are a lot of Finn settlements around here, I think.
Yeah.
If you want to think of that
They've
way.
done some restoring of buildings, and I'm just wondering if you knew about them, if you've had any communication with them, because they put a lot of effort in just this one little place. They move buildings and fix things up, but it's by the Ulu Rock, I think.
It's behind the
US
Ulu Rock,
too.
or between there and Iron River, and north of there, the Apollo Heritage Farm. Jenny Murphy went there, and I talked to the fellow as well. But she got her inspiration for the Cultural and Heritage Center, which we are now putting together, from being over there. So that was an inspiration for us. Yes.
Oh, I remember you telling me there were a couple of accidents along the line. Were there any that had fatalities?
Train accidents?
I think, yeah.
I don't know of anything like that, but I have a white book that I put together in for the 2013 centennial, and in there's a picture, several pictures on two sides of a page of the train derailing, the engine derailing right in front of our place. And Karen was 13 years old at the time, and so her dad took a picture of that. So there were many derails, but I don't know if any lives were taken. I don't think it moved fast enough for that to happen. Yes. Well, I'm glad you came, and enjoy the model railroad. Ken is going to start it up again, and he will make those sounds for you, and enjoy your evening. You could also look in the back and at the pictures, and there's a picture of the Bodine family because of being a pioneer family, and others can do the same. And others, the Lindsays have done that as well. Thank you for them. There's also a map that's up and down like this from the Omaha Railroad with their original plans. And one spot points out the Houghton Depot location, and the other one shows where the Sioux Spur Depot was, which was a boxcar turned into a depot, which is on my model railroad too. So go ahead and enjoy. Thank you for coming.